Welcome to Unlearning with Lindsey T. Jackson, and today we are talking about unlearning white feminism. We have an absolutely amazing panel here, and we are going to jump right into it. As always, quick housekeeping. If you haven't already, you are welcome to enable the captions. Running at the bottom of your Zoom screen is where I normally find it. And if you click on closed captions, you can even have the captions running in various languages. Live ASL interpretation is provided by our partners at Pro Bono ASL, amazing partners that we cannot recommend enough. If you are doing online events and you want to be increasing your inclusivity and your accessibility, please consider Pro Bono ASL as your future partner. Do they pay me to do this commercial? Absolutely not. Did I miss my life's calling to be a commercial announcer? Perhaps. If you haven't read our community guidelines, I'm going to recommend that you take a moment to do that now. Really interesting. In this community, we do something different, which is that we call on and we call in, which is very different than calling out and calling off. Calling on is, I know you, and I know that we are going to continue to be in relationship in the space of unlearning together. And so I can call on your relationship with your values and invite you into a closer relationship with them, which is different than I'm going to drop the meanest thing that I ever thought to say into the chat window and call out or call off this relationship, because relationships do not matter. In this space that we're creating, relationships do matter, and we invite you to practice this wonderful practice that comes from Loretta J. Scott. We will be recording. Unfortunately, not all of you are making it onto the recording. You can actually still turn on your camera and you will still not be on the recording. Only those that are spotlit are going to make it onto the recording. If at the end you come off and you ask a question, you'll make it onto the recording. But otherwise, I want to see you eating, because we used to do it. Some of you are too young to remember this, but we used to eat in front of one another and look at one another while they were chewing. Thank you, Amanda. But I still actually like to do that because I'm old. At the end, please provide us with a reflection and your feedback on what we can be doing better. Hey, if you're ready to kick off your DEI journey at your organization, remember that Sojourn DEI, our tech platform, is available for your small business or mid-size organization. All the step-by-step work plans, workshops, tools and resources that you need to move your smaller mid-size organization forward on their DEI journey. Hey, it's my favorite time of the day. Let's take a deep breath together and find our way fully into this space. Deep inhale in, deep exhale out. It's good to see you. Welcome, friends. Let's start with Ilsa Govan. Ilsa has extensive experience as a facilitator, consultant, writer, and social justice activist, co-founder of Cultures Connecting. Ilsa has led conversations about racial equity in workshops and conferences across the country. She also volunteers to coordinate the White Caucus at the annual National White Privilege Conference, and she's an author of a book, which we are going to get into later today. Ilsa, welcome to the virtual couch. I'm just so happy you're here.
Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to be here with y'all.
Yeah, which, as I was saying to your co-author, Tilman, have I been stalking you a little bit? Which my version of stalking is I'm just going to keep gently asking for you to be my friend and then get you onto my show. And then eventually you'll agree to have dinner with me. But your needs matter, so you can say no at any time.
I'll invite you to my next dance party, Lindsey.
What? Okay. Pick a vibe, because I will be all over it. Don't even. Which brings us to Tilman Smith. Tilman has been an educator for over 35 years, serving as a classroom teacher, administrator, field supervisor, college instructor, caucus facilitator, trainer, and coach. She has facilitated workshops throughout the country on the topics of anti-bias curriculum, white privilege, internalized sexism, and internalized white superiority. Tilman, welcome to the virtual couch. Just tell us quickly, how did you get to be friends with Ilsa first? No, sorry, not about me. How did this book come to fruition? Tell us a little bit about how
Well,
you two met.
thank you so much, Lindsay, and everybody for inviting me into this space. What a joy. They are connected. Ilsa, among all of her other amazing skills, happened to be my youngest child's fifth grade teacher. How is that for cool? And she was one of the most wonderful, fabulous people, teachers in the world at a time where we really needed her. So that's what brought us together, really. And then we came together to talk about this book for about 6 years, training, researching, meeting with our friend MG Lentz. And this book is the result, What's Up with White Women, of just years of thought and heart and conversation with a lot of people. Thanks for asking.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And everybody, you're going to get an opportunity to affirm everything Tilman just said about this book. I read it over the weekend and we're going to delve into it. And you are going to want to get 5 copies and hand them out as Easter presents for the upcoming holiday celebration of your choice. Which brings me to Kimfer, Flannery-Rye. The name says it all, Kimfer. Kimfer is passionate about diversity, equity, inclusion, and women in business. She is the founder of Inclusion Equals, a social enterprise focused on the IDEA, the idea, inclusion equals diversity plus equity plus accessibility, to build culture from the inside out, as well as the CEO of the F-Bomb Breakfast Club. Come on, Breakfast Club people, put your hands up, put your hands up, fucking yeah. A peer support community for women, femmes, and gentlemen's who are company founders and business owners. Kimfer, such a pleasure to have you on this virtual couch. I'm going to start with you today. When we say unlearning white feminism, and especially in the work that you've done and now leading a group of women business leaders, entrepreneurs, upstarts, many of us, if we're honest, right? What is it like stepping into that role? It's still predominantly a white organization as a woman of color.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, of course, putting me on the spot first. Hi, everyone. Yeah, there's a couple of things, right? Especially around the F-bomb. We're specifically talking about white feminism and leading an organization that is predominantly based with white women business owners. Not to say that we don't have women of color, people of color on our community, but I think it has a lot to do with the fact that it was birthed out of Seattle, right? So we got Megan McNally, who was the original founder. And as we know, Seattle, and not to say that Seattle is not diverse, because there is diversity here. I'm just saying, in general, our population here happens to be much more white, right? And because of that, you are going to get that population percentage, and that's going to bubble up. And on top of that, you do have that network begets network, connections begets connections. And I think Megan did a phenomenal job getting this organization started, but she herself is a white woman as well. And she does have friends and colleagues and people that she surround herself with. But I think it does make a difference in the spaces that you are and the face, unfortunately, that you are when you're representing an organization. So I'm hoping that with me also here, we'll continue to have that advocacy for those of us that are women of color, and also beyond that too, because I have quite a few friends who are often say, well, I am a they, them, but I do tend to be more on, on the feminine side versus the masculine side. And that's how I tend to approach myself But there isn't really space for me. I'm like, this is a space for you, because that's what it is all about. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I start the conversation here today because sometimes when we enter into these conversations, particularly talking about white feminism, defenses are already up. We're already a little bit like, I'm a good ally. I'm an accomplice. I have the sign in my front yard. I put the, blackout sign on my Facebook. And to what Kimfer is naming, if looking at the face of me, Lindsey, David, and Kimfer is the first time this week you've been in a space that was predominantly people of color, then this conversation is for you, right? What is it? Check me, Ilsa, Tilman, Kimfer. Is it 1 in 5 white people move through the majority of their life without engaging with a person of color?
That is correct.
Regularly?
And yeah, sadly
yeah.
true.
Yeah, Joy, can you invite Ilsa and Tilman up onto being spotlight as well when you get a second? Ilsa and Tilman, I'm going to start here. So everybody, here's the book, What's Up with White Women. I had to read it too, as not a white woman. I had to catch up and understand what was up with you. I'm on page 55. Mark it in your notes. Final thoughts, they write. The legacy of white women actively engaging in racist rhetoric and actions for white men or hiding behind racist assumptions to protect ourselves is a key component of our internalized sexism and white superiority. Many white women don't want to move out of this stage. A characteristic of immersion is to deny that any other way of being is desirable. We're perfectly happy, we tell ourselves, and anyone who cares to listen. The pain of having to accept the reality of sexism from white men and the regular practice of dehumanizing people of color both cut us deeply and can affect our physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Many white women in immersion will put up walls and create alternative narratives to protect ourselves from our woundedness and maintain our sense of control, coming across as cold and callous. This is the time when we need to most support and critical feedback from other white women to help us navigate through our racist and sexist assumptions. Recognizing we are immersed and moving forward takes humility and honesty. Ilsa, what's immersion? Tell us about that stage.
Yeah, in the book, Tilman and I both come from a background of human development. And so we were like, well, who doesn't love a developmental model? And so as we started talking about having workshops, we started thinking about like, well, what might be different stages that we go through? And what we love about this, so this is just zooming out a little bit, Lindsey, before getting to your question. What we love about this is then we can approach ourselves in earlier stages or recognize the stage that we're in with less shame or guilt, recognizing like, this is exactly where society wants us to be. And even, and then we can also see like what's possible beyond that. That's the other thing a developmental model offers is like, oh yeah, and there's another way of being that I might not have ever considered. When we talked with Peggy McIntosh, for example, she said, and she's the author of Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack and has been a tremendous mentor to us in this work. I was saying, so even, as we're talking to Peggy McIntosh, like she was saying, every day I wake up in immersion. And I have to do what I call installing the necessary software to move further. And it's just this idea that our society wants us to stay in this place of internalized sexism. Many white women believe what we've been told, that our bargain with white patriarchy is to get some advantage. And so when we're in immersion, we're not even aware that we've made that bargain. Like we are being harmed. And that's the thing that Tilman and I really wanted to bring across in our book too, is that we don't think that this benefits white women in any way to be in this place where we're being harmed by sexism, and we are being harmed by enacting racism. We are being dehumanized in the process of dehumanizing others. And immersion is really that stage where we don't know what we don't know. The way we think about it is like, I'm underwater, I can't breathe, and I don't know it.
Yes. Yes, this is Lindsey. This is a new idea for many people to think that I can be cultured, I can be conditioned to think that my white privilege benefits me in many ways. My sexualization or sometimes even infantilization as a white woman, that is what makes me sexy. That is what makes me beautiful. That is how I have amassed power. To then learn that actually it's harmful. It is not benefiting you. You have made a deal with a covert devil. Tilman, what has been the response from many women as they hear that from you? Are they like, thank you, Tilman?
So, some have, but I would say absolutely not all. And we knew that would be the case. You know, I'm a woman of a certain age, and I grew up when white feminism came into being. And I just thought it was the bee's knees. I mean, I was born into immersion, and here was an option for me to be in the world in a different way. I had no analysis of the lack of racial analysis that was willfully part of the feminist movement. And so I bought into it all the way. As I got older and as I became more involved in the work that I do now, there was a period, I'd say, immersion, capitulation, defense, which are developmental phases in the book, where I felt pretty ticked off that I had been given this lie that not only was sexism my main issue, but as long as I could become a good, powerful, smart woman, I had things figured out. And at the heart of it, Lindsey, and why we get negative feedback, especially from white women, is that at the heart of it, we were taught, and I bought into this idea that I'm a good person. I am a really good person. And so I couldn't possibly be racist, even if my actions show you that I'm racist. Ilsa and I were just talking about a conversation we had with Dr. Rachel Chapman, a brilliant professor at University of Washington. And she made it clear to us that the opposite of being racist is not being good. The opposite of being racist is being anti-racist. So this notion of being good should not be part of the conversation. And it's that moment where we get a lot of friction, especially from white women. But we found when we were promoting the book that white men really protect this notion that we're good. It serves them as much as it serves us.
Oh, this is Lindsey. Did everybody grab out their pen? They wrote that down. The opposite of being racist is not being good. It is being anti-racist. And it's so interesting you're saying that, Tilman. I was just reading a book or looking at a book that also talks about the myth of the good man, right? And that's another conversation when we have a relationship episode. Kimfer, I have probably 100 million and one stories that I could tell about being at work and the experience of being a Black woman in relationship to a white woman who was vying for power.
Yeah.
Save me telling another story and boring everybody. Can you, if you're willing, think of either where you've witnessed it, or if you're feeling safe to share vulnerably one of your own stories today, what is that experience like? What does it taste like? What are the colors, the shapes, the sounds?
Yeah, great question. Before I answer that, I want to dovetail to what Tilman was talking about is, as we know, and this isn't new to us, we have been born into this world of patriarchy. And because of that, we have, as women, been masking to look powerful and to play in that field, which is why when we talk about multi-levels of feminism that has occurred, that is that around the 90s to the early 2010s, that was the third wave, I think, of feminism, is where that's when we started putting on our power suits, right?
Yeah.
So if they won't accept this, then we're gonna look like them and we're gonna talk like them. So then we're one of the boys, we're one of the guys, right? And that in itself harms us altogether. That has no color. That has nothing to do with color, right? However, because of the fact that in our current, we're talking about mostly US, right? It's very different across the various cultures, and there's a lot of monocultures that are out there, like multicultural scenario that we have here in the US, and our US history is that it's beyond patriarchy, is white patriarchy. And so the most similar to that is going to now, unfortunately, is the white women in that scenario, when you are going to play like the boys, be like the guys, doing all of that. And because of the fact that that is where the power structure lies, when we go beyond the binary of the man, women thing, obviously we know that's not just that, but the next that comes to it, right? So we have the color, the race color thing going on, which is, we know, is also a construct. So there's that. So I think that's why this idea of white feminism has been standing for so long, is historically that's where things have been in the US. So if you think about just even the history of race and how that's shifted, of course that's going to come into play when we're talking about feminism as well, right? Because there's a learning curve that happens as we become more aware. As for how the stories, Lindsey.
You're in the hot seat when you're on this show, friend.
I
Come on.
know. What's interesting for me as an Asian woman, I think this is where it's kind of an interesting conversation for you and I, because because we're in the women of color side doesn't mean we're experiencing it the same way, right? I'm an Asian woman, and I don't know if you all know this, but technically I get paid more than the white woman, right? I think we're 92 cents to the dollar, right? Versus the 86, I think, is to the white woman, right? So interesting enough, the Asian women, Asian culture in the US has a different kind of relationship. We are one of those groups where the most palpable, we're most like you, the white people, but we are the most foreign at the same time. In the US, unless you have an accent, rarely will you, and Lindsey, you can correct me, but I've spoken to a lot of my friends and the research of that, so there's rarely someone's going to be like, where are you from, Lindsey? In the way that they ask me, where are you from, Kim? I will always be a perpetual foreigner in this land, in my land. I'm a US citizen, but that kind of nuance makes a difference, especially when we're talking about feminism as well. How can you be seen as an equal if people don't even believe I'm from here? Do you know what I mean? Like, how does that even happen? And then on top of that, because we're seen as a class above, because they love, we love to do the racial, they like to say like, oh, why can't you be more like the Asian people? They're the smart ones, they're the they're the doctors. And that doesn't help us any more than it helps the other communities. And so because of that, the way that I think white feminism hits me personally, and maybe those that look more like me, we have a slightly different way that gets attached to us than maybe what you might have experienced, Lindsey. We definitely have experiences, and those stories are great as well, or not great, but they're just different because of the way I look. And so unfortunately, that's the reality of it all.
Yes, this is Lindsey. I think you're doing such a great job of painting, again, as Ilsa, you had opened up, that the ways that white feminism has played out through history, whether it's, the original push for voting rights, where they were like, oh, let's not push for this slavery ending at the same time. We don't want to mess up the story, right? Or push for the Voting Rights Act, or the ratification of, what is it? Give me the acronym, in the late 60s, right? It was like, oh, let's not push for these LGBTQIA rights at the same time. Let's not, right? And yet, again, we see how it's not benefiting anybody. Either it is liberation for all, or we just continue the oppression caste system. And the ways that this plays out for Kimfer, the ways that this plays out for Lindsey, it is playing out white woman to white woman in your organizations as well. There's another term I think we would be wrong to not introduce here, which is queen bee syndrome. Anybody want to talk about that one? Ilsa, you want to take that one? What is queen bee syndrome? And it's not about Beyonce. I hate to tell everybody.
I was like, I caught that last fall.
It's not these ones.
I haven't heard that terminology before, Lindsey. I think that I have an idea of what it might mean, but would you mind sharing what your understanding is?
Absolutely. This is Lindsey. So again, when we look at the research within organizations and thinking about how a beehive works, although there's a lot of science to suggest that we in our human minds cannot possibly really understand the complex nature of a beehive, but there's only one queen bee, right? And as Kimfer was saying, the ways that we are conditioned to believe scarcity mindset is always at play. If I'm the one woman who makes it to the C-suite, if there is scarcity embedded in my brain, that means I have to be constantly attacking any other women that might be a threat to my place in leadership. Yeah. And so what we see in the research is that women in high levels actually tend to be the worst culprits of patriarchal behaviors, of racist behaviors, of homophobic behaviors against other women, because their sense of power is even more threatened. Is that what you were thinking, Ilsa? You were going to go there?
Yeah, and so much more, right? So I don't even, this is Ilsa, I'm not sure where to even start with that.
Around your mind.
So much came up for me. One of the things that I was thinking about was just that for Tilman and I, a part of this process was to work together. Like even when you invited me, because we had a relationship before, and I'm like, but Tilman also could be on this panel, like we try to do things in collaboration as much as possible to like counter that idea that what we need to do is compete with one another. Like I'm not trying to be seen as the best author of What's Up with White Women, and then Tilman was my support person. This is co-constructed knowledge that wouldn't exist if it weren't for us and the much larger community that contributed to our thinking and continues to contribute to that. I think about mining my own experiences. So when you ask about where have you seen this, like what have your experiences been, Kimfer? What have yours been, Lindsey? I think also for us as white women, we can start to ask ourselves, where have we done this? And the interesting thing is that we like to protect our innocence. We like to think, I would never do that. Like I'm one of the good ones. I came to the conversation on white feminism. So I know that's everybody who's here, right? And so it's harder for us to unpack that. So I can share a couple of things that I've noticed in myself around that. One of them is that my business partner, Dr. Caprice Hollins, who's a Black woman, has to not constantly, but I would say over the past 16 years that we've been working together, has reminded me so many times to use we instead of I, to name her and give her credit. Like I've never once had to say, oh, Caprice, that thing that you shared, like I don't really want to say this, but it was kind of my idea too, where she's had to have that conversation with me so many times. And so it's just this like, so not only do I speak individualistically, which is also a part of the socialization of white people. I'm trying to compete with other people, but then like one of the people in my life that has been critical to my success in the work that I do, then I fail to even give that person credit. And in just knowing that, like, when Caprice and I are both successful, it builds cultures connecting and it makes us both better. And the critical feedback that we give each other is like so helpful to our growth. But when I am in this mindset of competition, then I'm trying to one up somebody or prove that I'm the best in a way that actually undermines the work that we're doing. And it's like, and I would love to believe that I don't do that anymore, you know, or that like once I know that in my head, then it will stop being how I show up. And for me, this like learning to be anti-racist, learning to fight patriarchy and internalize sexism in myself is a part of an like ongoing process. And just because I know something doesn't mean that it becomes embodied. When we came in today, just another quick example, and there was a little technical difficulty. You know how much was going on in my head about I can fix it and I need to be the one to fix it. And maybe if we just did this and maybe if we didn't do that. And I want other white women in here to think about like, how many times have you rearranged the chairs in the room when you weren't the one hosting the meeting, right? Like we, like so there's this part of like this need to over control and get over involved in the business of people of color in particular that shows up as paternalistic thinking in our relationships. And I think that that's also like one of those things that feels subtle to us and feels real obvious to you, and yet may not be something that you can give us feedback on because we're likely to double down and be defensive and say, well, I was just trying to be helpful.
Yes, this is Lindsey. You're reminding me, one of my longtime collaborators and friends, Robin Force Counts, and I talk about the triangle that often exists between women of color and white women of this deification, infantilization, and then attack, right? So first you put women of color and especially Black women in a deified space within your life. They are the sage, they are the oracle from the Matrix, right? But then when they do not take on the parental figure, they show any of their humanity, they show that they are imperfect or weak, then there's an infantilization of the white woman, right? How dare you? You took away the, you know, best friend character that I had signed you to, and now I am feeling bereft, I'm feeling attacked, I'm feeling sad, which then leads to an attack, right? I have to make you wrong for this character that you failed to play that I had put you into. And this shows up in workplaces all the time. Tilman, you in the book share a story. I wonder if you'd be willing to share it today about an experience when you were younger, and I think it was your first baby. And you were going to a wedding that you did not want to go to. Would you share a little bit about that? I think, again, where Ilsa has taken us, what does it look like as a white woman playing this character?
This is Tilman again. When I was young, I told you I was born into immersion, and I was born into a family that the things that mattered were that we were white and that we had money. And those are the things that were valued. And I had moved far away from my family home, come to Seattle, where I live now, and I'd had my first child. And I was expected to bring my child back to the East Coast for my parents. I must have been like their 40th anniversary. First off, my child was young. I did not want to bring him back to this family that I knew had different values than I did. But I was compelled to come back because my father kept saying, this is what you need to do as a good daughter. So I came back with my child. My partner did not come with me. And I kind of settled into the house, even though I was feeling very uneasy for my child. When it came to the anniversary party, there was no one there that could take care of my baby while I went to the party. So what would you do? I was going to bring my baby with me. Of course, I was just going to bring him with me. I was breastfeeding, it was fine, but that was not allowed. I was not allowed to bring my baby with me. So they hired a babysitter to come to the house so that I could go to this party. Now, this is the part where most of us as white women don't like to describe what happened. But I had a vision of who was going to come take care of my baby. And that vision was an older white woman, like a grandmother, who was going to share my values, know exactly what I needed, and just fit right in. And instead, when I opened the door, a young Black woman with a large fro and a mini skirt was at my door, really impatient, wondering how long she had to be at our house, and not very excited that she got to spend her time watching my white baby boy for very little money. So all of my racist buttons were pushed, and my internalized sexism saying, don't leave the baby, but make sure you're happy that your father is happy. So in that moment, when I left my child with this wonderful young woman that just didn't meet my picture of what I wanted, and my racism came flooding up, it caused me to behave in ways that were so awful. I called her all the time. I was constantly checking in on her. And I ended up leaving the party early because I just knew that she wasn't taking care of my child. So when I got home and found my baby in his crib, sleeping well, and she was just hanging out as what she was supposed to do, I still couldn't give her the benefit of my doubt. I still had a story that she hadn't done things right and had made me come home early. So that is not an unusual circumstance. It might be quite a story, but the reality is we as white women do things like that on a regular basis. It might be more subtle, it might be more nuanced, we might behave a little bit better. But in fact, we have expectations that are often not met for our own personal reasons. We then project them onto the women of color that happen to be in our sphere, and the women of color are the people that end up paying. And we get to act as though we're innocent and we didn't mean to hurt anybody, but what could I do? So that's a lifetime of relearning, of undoing and unlearning really bad internalized sexism and racism.
Wow.
Lindsey, this is Kimfer. Tilman, thank you so much for sharing the story, first of all. And I think that really showcases also why then the saviorism shows up oftentimes, right? I'm going to be the one who's going to go save the thing. Also, like you were saying, like I would be the one that would need to fix the chairs, or need to like do the thing, because there's that immersive need or understanding that only we can do it better. I can do it better as the white woman, or whatever. This sort of embedded idea that they can't do it as well, even if you even are cognizant of it or not. That's sometimes where a lot of that, I need to perfect it, because obviously I have the skill set and the thing to make that perfectionism happen, or I'm gonna be the savior of it. And even if you don't recognize it's a savior complex, it's, well, no, I'm here to help. I'm here to elevate. I'm here to empower you. Like, I'm empowered just fine. Thank you so much. And so I think that's why those things are super tied. When we talk about white feminism, we're also talking about that idea of saviorism as well.
Saviorism, this is Lindsey. Saviorism, perfectionism, avoidance of discomfort, bigger is better, constant growth, right? An attempt at staying objective, not being subjective, rooted in emotion and community and connection. Kimfer, I wonder, do you think that the kind of Becky phenomenon, right, ruins this, it distances many women from, it's like, oh, again, that's those people over there. That's the extreme of it. I don't have any of that because
Yeah, I think so. Like, I'm guessing, and I'm also not as familiar. I'm guessing the Becky is sort of the Karen, as we might think of it, right? And so
this
of
is
course
maybe
you're
a
like,
whole, but it was like Becky, then Karen. Yeah.
yeah, and then all, like, and so, and yes, absolutely, because we're watching social media of these outrageous behaviors, and you're like, that's not me. I'm not that Karen. I'm not that white person, right? Of course, because we're doing some comparison to really like severe things that we're witnessing on social media that gets captured. What we're not talking about is those things that Tilman was able to, just articulate on a day-to-day level. And even that, some people are going to say like, oh, that seems extreme too. But no, like it's the subtle things of we're talking about. People have used this example before. You're walking down the street and you decide to move over. Why? Do you do that for everyone? Or did you do that for a Black man? Or did you do that for, like there are things like we subconsciously do, and those are the insidious things. Those are what it is that turns into these bigger things compressed. Does that make sense? When you are in those like compressed moments is when all those little things that we do, it gets like it just blows up to become that Karen or whatever you have, because it's and not to and for those of you who might be named Karen, I feel so bad. Becky's in the Karens, all the names that gets kind of co-opted like this way. I'm gonna guess that they're not like that on their like normal everyday, and normal is is also a concept, but their day-to-day activity isn't like that, like severeness. It's probably those like insidious little things that have been, and then they were put under their own correct pressure cooker or whatever it is that trigger them, thus to like go into that basically a volcano.
Yes. Oh, I'm reminded of, I grew up in the Black Baptist church. This is Lindsey, of the saying, but for the grace of God, right? But for the grace of God, that's any of us on our worst day. But it's those tiny little behaviors every day, which this is something we see so often in organizations as well as in family systems, is the passive aggressivity. And I think all of you are alluding to that, and you definitely talk about it in the book, Ilsa and Tilman, about the ways that we allow white women to be angry is to be passive aggressive. And I talk about this a lot in organizations, that we very quickly call out active aggression. And we tend to think of Black women as being active aggressive, right? But what I'll see when I do research, or, I'm going through the data in organizations, is I'll see that somebody was at the receiving end of months, if not years, of passive aggressive acts, just cutting into them. But the moment that person lashed out, that was when it was considered a problem. Who wants to take that one? Talk to us about the tool of passive aggressivity, especially being here in the Pacific Northwest today.
Well, it allows me to hold on to my innocence, so then I can keep my goodness. So then I can say, well, that's not what I really meant. Or, oh, I'm so, I think about working with, when I was an elementary school teacher, and I had consistently struggled with working with young Black men in my classroom, to be frank about it, you know, honest enough to take data on myself. And I remember, you know, going up to a young boy who was like misbehaving in the classroom, being like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to send you to the office." And he's like, "Are you enjoying this? Like, why are you smiling when you're sending me to the office? Does that give you pleasure?" So like, there's these mixed messages, but it really is like, I can think of so many times where I just like, and I guess one that comes to mind, I was talking with a white woman recently, and she had heard, she wasn't in a meeting, and she'd heard that one of her colleagues cried in the meeting. So she gets together with her colleague to have a conversation the next day, and she says, "Oh, I just want to check in and see how you're doing." And the woman says, "Oh, did you hear that I cried?" And she was like, "No, I didn't hear that you cried." You know, so we even make up these stories to like tell ourselves. And it's just like, can we catch ourselves in the moment of pretending like we're innocent when we're actually like being really intentional? And then the interesting way that patriarchy plays into that is then white men will come to our defense and say, "Well, she clearly didn't mean it."
Mm.
And yeah, and so then you're talking about like, and so then if like a Black woman is direct in communication, well, then she's the bad person. She's the person who's causing the trouble, versus like the everyday needling that I might have been doing. Like, are you sure that you dotted the I's and crossed the T's in your paper, Lindsay? Are you sure that you did this? You know, and maybe I should just double check one more time all of the work that you're doing.
Oh,
And
it's
then,
Ilsa.
and then,
Oh,
that,
we're
right,
bringing
and
back
then it
the
builds
memories.
up and it explodes. And then who's seen as the problem? And I think that, and I think there's an important context here to recognize, which is that white men are the ones who are ultimately benefiting from this. That just like there's that wedge that you mentioned earlier, Kimfer, between Black people and Asian people, that there's been a wedge that's been driven between us as women as well, that white patriarchy benefits from.
Yeah, I'd love to add to that for a minute. This is Tilman. First off, do you see why I love Ilsa so much? Oh, she's so great. And passive aggressiveness as a strategy for white women surviving real sexism from white men is effective. There are times in my life where I know I couldn't come straight at a white man, but I sure could figure out how to get around him. And I was going to use those strategies to do that. So the passive aggressiveness that I've used as a strategy to survive, often I've maladapted, just like Ilsa so brilliantly described, with people of color, where I actually am in a position of agency, but I use that same strategy, and it's confusing and disrespectful, and it actually pulls the rug out from under people, as opposed to helping me buy time or take care of myself when I'm in danger. So part of it is us understanding, and we talk about in the book, strategies that we've learned to survive sexism that are not effective when we're in a multiracial group. Crying is one of the most obvious ones that we would mention. But I feel like that's where all of these behaviors can manifest from, are our idea that we have to survive some sort of power issue. But in fact, we're not owning our agency, and we're actually causing harm in the name of being nice.
Oof. Mrs. Lindsay, damn it, I have to end it there. Thinking about the ways that we cause harm in the name of being nice. We're at that terrible, lovely time.
Lindsay?
We're gonna keep it,
Okay.
I'm gonna open it up for questions, but for those of you who are bound by Western constructs of time and have to jump at the top of the hour, we kiss you and send you on your way. Otherwise, we're gonna stay on to let this conversation take its natural course. Kimfer?
Oh, I just want to a reminder to everyone. There's a difference between being nice and being kind.
Mm.
There's a difference between being nice, Being nice really is protecting you. Being kind is supporting someone else's need to move forward, right? So just keep that in mind as we think about like, am I, the passive aggressiveness that we are talking about? I'm doing it because I'm being kind. Oh, that's for me, right? Or I'm just being nice. That's doing it for me. I'm gonna be kind and actually be, be forthcoming. So that way I can learn, they can learn from it, I can learn from it, we can move forward with whatever that we're facing. So I just want to put that out there.
Oh, I love that. I love that. We're opening it up for questions. If you want to open your mic and ask Ilsa, Tilman, or Kimfer a question, or you can write it out and send it to me, and I will read it aloud for you. Or perhaps David can sign it aloud. But what are your burning questions? What are your thoughts? What are your offerings? What are you struggling with? Here's one. Tilman, can you explain to us what it was that turned the corner for you in your relationship with whiteness and patriarchy?
Oh, okay, we've got about 6-7 hours here that we can uncover.
Always,
this.
yes, yes. Grab your popcorn, people. Let's get into it.
A couple of things. I will say at the very heart of it, and this isn't something I always share, but I was born into a family, I was born in the late 50s, and our family had a construct on the East Coast that was very traditional. And we had an African-American woman who worked for us, and she raised me. And she took the huge risk from the time I was very young to tell me that I did not need to be like the rest of my family. Now, this was huge. Talk about revolutionary, right? If my family had caught on to what she was teaching me, that would have been big. But because I trusted her and I got to know what her life was like, I was given this vision into a world that I was never supposed to have. And so from a young age, I knew there were options. And then as soon as I could leave home, I was able to figure out how to see the world in a different place, in a different way. So a huge gift that I do not romanticize, because her life was not fabulous, but I honor with what I try to do every day.
Mm. Mm. What was her name, Tilman?
Supremia. Is that not a beautiful name? Supremia.
We invite your teacher into this space.
Thank you, Lindsey.
Any other questions, thoughts, ahas?
Share an aha for me. See, I see Rebecca.
Alex, go ahead. Let's have Rebecca H first and Alex on deck.
And I wonder if Alex and I are going to ask something similar because we're from the same place. So we're in a death care organization, and we provide direct services to everybody, right? Regardless of who they are, where they come from, what they do. And so my kind of question is something that we have struggled with is, how do we embody anti-racism and all of this work and support our volunteers in being anti-racist and doing this work while needing to compassionately interact with folks who are racist, who are sexist, and who are giving that back to us, but we still need to take care of them.
Who wants to take it first?
This is Kimfer. That is Rebecca. First of all, thank you for the work that you do. That's a really hard one to answer, right? I think it's in some ways, and this is the best I can kind of maybe do for you, is to share. people ask me, how do you do the DEI work when you're also dealing with possibly being re-traumatized or ways in which people are going to be triggering you while you're trying to help them in their situations. And this may not necessarily fit in your realm as much, but I will tell you in the way that I approach, which is when I put my educator hat on or my practitioner hat on, because I have chosen this path to do this. I don't have to. Not all people of color who have experienced the things that they have experienced are in diversity, equity, and inclusion work, even if they're forced to sometimes in their organizations. But because I have chosen to do that, and maybe this is part of my armoring up or masking and all the things that are not necessarily positive terms. But for me, I tend to think of this as this is my job and this is the thing that I've signed up for because it was important to me. And thus, when those scenarios happen, I really have a separation of that's not directed at me. That is them in their life, their situation, their journey, which may or may not ever get much better. And again, that's a really contextual word there, much, move past where they're at. And it's not always my job to solve that, right? Even as a practitioner who's being hired to do the thing, it's not my personal job to always solve everyone that's there. And so, again, I don't know if that's helpful or not. That's the way that I tend to approach it, Rebecca.
Yeah, thank you.
Kimfer, when you said
This
that,
is Lindsey. Oh, go ahead, Ilsa.
this is Ilsa. Thanks, Lindsey. It just made me think about too that that idea that I am entitled to my own boundaries as well. And so it's always okay for me to just say something simple like, please don't say that around me. And I think that there's an element of breaking white solidarity that white people are often hesitant to even set that kind of boundary and be clear about it.
Yeah, that's really great. I think one example I can provide is, if you all remember, right after the horrendous shootings in Atlanta and there was all the Asian hate that was happening. I literally the day after it happened in the evening, the next day, I had a engagement with one of my clients, and even they were also white leaders. White women, they actually were really lovely and reached out the next morning and said, Kimfer, are you sure you are still up to do this conversation? How are you? How can we make space for you? But we also want to provide the space for you to be able to do that if that is what you need. And so for me, I said, hey, I'm here. I said, I do not want to lead the conversation, but I'll be here as someone who can help you facilitate this sort of new, because we were already having a conversation around sort of in this space anyway. But I will tell you, that was probably one of the first times where I literally felt my cortisol levels go up and up and up and up and up, right? Because I am also dealing with this while I'm being there as an educator, as a facilitator, as a practitioner, and letting them know, I understand you, and here's what you want to do with your Asian friends. Tears are fine, but there's difference between like what we consider white tears and tears where they now have to help you get better. That's not it. You can say, I'm angry on your behalf, I'm upset, and this is just my body exerting the stuff, but I want to be there for you. Like, so I'm having like these coaching moments with people while I'm going through the level of anxiety, right? And so I'm there with you, Rebecca, in the sense like there are moments where that's happening. And then I decided after that event and also wrote to my clients saying, hey, just let you know, I'm sure I looked calm, but I want to let you know where my body was at. I am going to like remove myself for the next few days, right? So, yeah.
And this is Lindsey, that's it too. It's part of our liberation work is to be able to just name things. I want to name where I am today. I'm at 80% capacity. I just saw a Black mother be killed in her home right? Like being able to just name it, claim it as women in any target rank identity, we are often taught to focus on the safety of those in their dominant group status or in their agent rank status, their comfort. The other thing I would just add to all the beautiful offerings, one of the things that I teach myself and all of our consultants to do is the thing that is really upsetting you or triggering you and that person, you must find the same aspect of that in yourself, right? I may not be racist, but I have certainly been on a journey of unlearning classism and internalized classism. I may not be sexist, questionable, but I have certainly been engaged in a journey of unlearning ableism, right? And so being able to, the thing that we often are triggered in somebody else is because that we are denying it in ourselves, its presence. It is our shadow work. And so if you can't find empathy for them, it's because you don't find empathy for yourself in that same work. I've got some questions in the chat. Let me check in. Alex, where are you? Did you have a different or same question?
Same, essentially, just an aha moment about my personal need to help and save, and learning here how that can do harm as well. So thank you.
Okay, I've got Claire, then I've got a question in the chat window, and then Lauren, hopefully we're gonna have time, but we'll see how we go. Claire H, open up your mic. Claire H4@comcast.net. Would you like to open up your mic and ask your question?
Yes, I want to ask about white women in leadership in organizations, particularly nonprofit organizations. I think white women have a lot of power and a lot of leadership here. And I want to know if you have some stories or thoughts about how to work successfully in those organizations, particularly now DEI being so in attack and so many things done without any thought besides a 1 hour here and there. I mean, I know the 1 hour bit doesn't work, but what are your thoughts and success stories of working with some of us white women?
I like that you changed it to success stories. I was going to say, Judith and I have some stories we could tell. Kimfer, Tilman, Ilsa, who wants to take that one first?
This is Tilman. Thanks for asking that, Claire. Success stories are tricky, right? Because I think Claire named it, nonprofits, education, white women are pervasive in those areas. And it's one of the areas that we realized we could flourish in. And so we feel comfortable there, and we often rise to the top. One of the things that Ilsa and I have really kind of been trying to uncover, we borrowed a phrase from Paul Kivel, an amazing anti-racist activist and author. He wrote a book called Uprooting Racism that I couldn't recommend enough. And he had a phrase called the buffer zone that he used around issues of class. And then we have asked if we could borrow for the purposes of our analysis. So when you think about white women in positions of leadership in nonprofits, for instance, they are often creating a buffer zone for the white men that are actually the people making policies, making laws, creating the funding that then is funneled down to us in leadership positions. And then we actually do their bidding by controlling all of the people below us. So they don't even have to be bothered. So in that buffer zone, we often end up making decisions and choices that hurt us in order to make sure that we're gaining benefits from the patriarchy that is actually making the decisions. Knowing that doesn't mean I never make those same bad mistakes where I use power in negative ways, but it certainly helps me navigate my values around why I'm doing what I'm doing. Am I actually perpetuating bad behavior in order to keep my position, status, money, whatever? Or am I using my position to genuinely open up doors and do the things that I profess I want to do? So for me, having a chance to have that analysis and really understand what role I play in that buffer zone is a huge success story that gives me more options than I felt I had before.
Yes. Ilsa, I'm going to jump to the next question. How do you deal with white feminism camouflage wrapped up in transgenderism?
I'm not sure that I understand the question.
Kimfer and Tilman, unless one of you want to start, I think I understand the question in the ways that if I think about naming my identity as cis and well, you might have to give me some time to think about that and work on that with my therapist before I continue that sentence. But naming that my analysis on this is not from lived experience. That's what I want to say. My first understanding of the question might be the ways that, and correct me questioner if I'm wrong, the ways that as individuals in their gender transition journey may have benefited from agent rank status. So if I was born and my parents identified me as male, and then in my journey of awareness knew myself as woman, and now and moving through to that affirmation of gender, but I have lived and benefited from agent rank socialization and whiteness, how does that often even more make this complex? And again, naming that I'm not an expert in this, my research has not focused on this, and there are people on this call who I've had very in-depth conversations about this. I would say that the same things apply, right? Anytime when we are not doing our own analysis of where we have had or benefited from agent rank privilege, and then we want to claim community with a group that we have not previously been in community with, your work is the same. You must begin a deep analysis of interrogation, of unlearning, of naming privilege, of naming agency, of naming indoctrination in some ways, before you can claim community with a group that has always existed in target rank status. That was a lot of big words, but did that make sense? Right? Ilsa, add on there. Oh, Kimfer?
Kimfer, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Kimfer. I think, one of the ways that I'm thinking about this, again, since I don't have that lived experience, is thinking about it in an intersectional perspective. So intersectionality is a really interesting thing about us because we're not just this or that, right? There's numerous things. And we talk about, when we talk about intersectionality, is that we then are talking about power and privilege. And I don't mean privilege in the definition of unearned privilege. There is that definition, but definition of privilege is also, what is your power status in access, in the way that you move around in the world and the ease in which you do it. So if you think about it in the sense of intersectionality, I think it helps to think about this a little bit more. For example, from again, from a gender perspective, and again, I'm only putting the binary out there, is that yes, women have the lower power structure than men. Yes, Asian women technically have a higher power status than Hispanic women. Okay, so now I'm like over there. I grew up in poverty. I went through it twice, actually. First time in South Korea, and then second time here in the US, in Iowa, during the early 80s farm crisis. And so then socioeconomically, like totally in the margins. And then now I'm at a place where I am in a socioeconomic class that is probably considered wealthy right now. And then there is the idea of also like your body, your ableism, or all the things. Disabilities, physical disabilities is kind of an interesting thing. There are people that have all their lives have to deal with it, and people who can go in and out of it, right? So I'm thinking, again, this is like my very, I am not versed in this, but I think about it in the sense, like by nature of, even if you had that power structure before, let's say you were a white man, transitioned and into a white woman, you're going to feel that power structure shifted, because people are now going to perceive you as a woman. And because of that, you have lost some of that power and privilege that you did not have before. And then on top of that, you're in a power ranking where, when you think about it in a woman status, unfortunately, transgender women tend to have less power than women status, cisgendered women status. So you're going to feel that power struggle and that. So I think if you just look at it as like you had power before, so you're going to bring that power with you over here, I think that is that strange, only a singular thing we're looking at, versus all of these intersectional way that you truly have to look at it.
Yes, and that's it. There's loss of power as projected on you by society, but when you've grown up, cultured, experiencing that power, that is very different than those who have existed, and we're just working within this scenario, existing as women their entire life, feeling or at the behest of lack of power the entire time, right? And so the complexity that Kimfer is naming is just baked into it, right? There's one, how society has perceived you, but then there's also how you have been cultured to perceive yourself, which is nuanced and complex. Someone also just dropped into the chat window, which I think is really something for us to think about too, is the way that cis white women fight having trans girls, women in sports. And I would say cis white women, but also cis women across the racial structure, because I think that, again, we as an animal tend to, in this society, we tend to look for where we have power, right? And so as a cis woman, I go, well, I have this power thing through being cis. And so who's the person that I get to oppress now? So I'm gonna choose transgender girls and women, right? And so don't forget, just because you've oppressed, you don't get a pass for not potentially being the oppressor at some point. Lauren, wrap us up.
First of all, a just statement of gratitude from a Southern California native now living in Salt Lake City, Utah. It is an anti-DEI state. There has been very damaging legislation recently passed, and myself and a handful of colleagues and friends continue to do this work because we feel called, because we have lived experiences, because we want to raise up another generation of humans that can be kinder. So thank you. And I would like to invite anyone to connect, to share any resources you all might have or insights for those of us doing work in this kind of space with lots of very nice people.
Lauren, one of the things about this work is that it can feel very lonely, and that is by design. And you are not alone. There's 40 people on this call right now. There were, what, 80 at some point, right? And this is just a taste of this community. So join the Unlearning community. Reach out to Ilsa, Tilman, Kimfer. Reach out to me. You are not alone.
You'll see me in your DMs all over LinkedIn. And thank you all. This is beautiful.
I'm here for it, right? That is also a myth of white supremacy, that we are alone. We are not. Beloved, I have to close this space. Joy has yelled at me multiple times, but I love you. I adore you. Thank you for being patient with us as we got Unlearning back on track this year. Bigger, better things to come, which is saying a lot because this panel was fire. Ilsa, Govan, Tilman Smith, Kimfer, Flannery-Rye. Please pick up the book, What's Up with White Women? Book club to come. Please check out F-Bomb Breakfast Club, Kimfer, Flannery-Rye's newest venture. In the deck, you'll be able to find out where to follow them, where to stalk them like I do, all the good things. We need a better word for stalking because that's inappropriate. Like a love version, you know, but okay. Thank you. Happy Wednesday. Be well. Remind yourselves that you are not alone. Bye.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much. What a gift.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsey. Great to be in space with you, Elsa and Tilman. Looking forward to staying connected. And thank you,
Definitely.
everyone, for your participation.
Yes.
Wonderful comments, questions. Lovely to see so many F-bombers on the, love it.